Hi, this is Living Raw Radio, and my name is Geeta Sidhu-Robb, and I, as always, get the opportunity to spend a bit of time with an amazing human being because I am absolutely fulfilled by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And you never know how they get there, why they get there, where it comes from, where it starts, because it's so different for each one of us. But I think that that is what makes life worth living. I think that's what makes the connections that we make worth living. And just it's so absolutely wonderful to me, the kind of people that we meet on our journeys. And today's person is no less than extraordinary in what she's achieved. But my guest today actually has achieved things I'm going to say something that is, I would say, in the right way. I always feel that when you do the work on yourself and then you come out to share that work, I always feel that's the right way to do it, because at some stage the work internally just has to be done. And so whenever you meet someone who's so aligned with that as a concept, I love it completely. So Kitty Waters, welcome. And thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm excited already. Like, you and I have just met, but yeah, I feel like we've known each other a long time.
It's that connection, isn't it? Of being in the right place, being in the same place and doing the same things. So Kitty, your story is unfortunately not unusual, but what you've done with it is incredibly extraordinary, because you were in the city and you were a director of a recruitment company. And then you said, sort of almost quite throwaway, oh, I had a nervous breakdown. I was like, what? And you were like, yeah, actually I had two. I'm like, what? Tell me more.
Thank you. Well, my background in history was a family that had a very long history of depression for the female side of our family. Yeah, we had nervous breakdowns, we had bipolar, we had suicides.
Ran through the family?
Yeah, literally down my mother's side, down the left-hand side of my family. And then in my father's side, we have alcoholism.
Well, codependency is it.
Yeah, so yours truly.
That's unnerving.
Well, I think, now when I look at it, I realize I came in to clear both. But when I was in my 20s, I didn't have an understanding. It wasn't talked about that we had this family history. Alcohol wasn't really talked about. Alcoholism wasn't really talked about. And in my 20s, I was in a very high performing job in the city with a very male dominated industry.
Yeah.
My response to that was to compete. And my response to that was to be in my masculine and compete. And I tell you what, Geeta, I was bloody good at it.
I can well believe it.
Well, until I got to the point where I was literally dying inside, because I was in my masculine energy. I wasn't in my feminine energy. And I was suffering with very bad depression. I was bottling up emotions. I wasn't feeling my feelings. I actually had a very innocent affair with somebody I worked with. And I hated myself, actually, because the person was engaged to be married to somebody else. And I didn't like who I was and what I was doing. And in my
although you were single.
More the fact that I had feelings for somebody who was taken, and actually I couldn't stop myself because I'd fallen for him. Like, I literally had fallen for him. But at the same time, my black and white thinking was that I was wrong, and it was just black and white. What I should be doing, what I was doing was wrong. And so I internalized all my emotions because I couldn't tell anybody because I was so ashamed of myself. So I internalized, and I used alcohol to cope. And then I cracked. I think I probably was like that for about a year. And then at one point I remember having a nervous breakdown driving a car. I just literally had to pull over and I cracked. And I said to my mum, I don't know what to do. I've got, I'm just sending myself insane. And I remember coming home and I went to the doctor and I got antidepressants and they made me feel horrible. And, I kind of took myself off them. And luckily for me, the place I worked had an employee assistance program and I went and got counselling. But I didn't really learn my lesson, unfortunately, because I still didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't understand that I was drinking my emotions. I didn't understand that I wasn't feeling my feelings.
Yeah.
I was using the alcohol as a way of moving that stuckness, that energy around my body. So this carried on, this bouts of depression for probably until I was about 28. And then cocaine got in the mix.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was quite a sort of messy existence for me.
Well, you were thorough.
Oh, I really went to the bottom. Yeah.
Very thorough.
Yeah.
But in a way, you almost have to, because in spiritual terms, that always becomes your breaking point. Always comes the dark night of the soul has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sucks balls when it's happening, but it does have to happen, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I wouldn't change it for the world now, because the insight I have into people who are depressed, you know, that's the type of individual that I love to work with, actually, because I've been there. I've been through what they're coping with. So it's given me a huge insight into individuals who are suffering. And I can say I've cured my chronic depression. You know, I don't suffer anymore, and I really understand how I created it. So a lot of my work now is in working with individuals who have that sense of disconnection and anxiety and depression.
So hang on, that's such a great phrase. How did you cure it?
Well, I really got to understand my mental thought patterns. In our family, we had very detrimental, negative thinking. So we would always tend to look at what was going wrong. We were always quite self-deprecating in our sense that we weren't, you know, we would always put ourselves down. And this, coupled with emotion in my family, was viewed as weak. So I remember
stiff upper lip.
Total British stiff upper lip family, absolutely. And we didn't cry. I never saw my mother cry. I saw my mother cry once when I was 16. You know, I remember it because that was literally once I saw her cry. Never saw my dad cry. And crying, we just didn't do it. You know, it was, why would you cry? That's a sign of weakness. So
then in your brain, you link emotion as being weak.
Yes, and so you store everything inside, and then when you have this negative thinking, literally, you know, emotions weigh us down. If we aren't clearing our negativity, if we aren't clearing the trauma, if we're not clearing what's going on for us, it literally weighs us down. So those sort of turbulent years, that was everything I was doing. I was literally kind of such a negative vibration, and it was reflected back to me in my surroundings.
Gosh, that's really, I mean, because you create what you are. And if that's what was happening, then that's what you were creating, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was, you know, I would look at everything that was wrong with me.
What helped you to start seeing it differently?
I think for people listening that maybe are suffering with something similar to what I'm talking about, like at points I was watching myself, I was so disconnected from myself, I couldn't feel, I was floating out over here. I had really trapped myself in my thinking. You know, I wasn't married, I was single, I was overweight, my life did not look how I thought it should. Okay, now attachment causes suffering. You know, when we are attached to the way our lives should look, we will suffer.
Because it doesn't ever look, it very rarely does look like that.
Exactly. And of course, if we think we should be this, we should be that, we should be this, we're shooting all over ourselves. We make ourselves miserable. You know, I thought, you know, there was something wrong with me because I was single and, you know, I had all this stuff. And now I realize I was just on a different path, you know, and I never fitted in, like with my peers, with my school friends, with my university friends, with my work friends. They all settled down, got married. Wasn't my lot. But now I know why, because I'm on a different path.
So what happened then? So you found out, you started to unpack all this.
So the story gets worse, actually. 28, I got a phone call at work.
I have time.
Well, if I can come back from this, so hopefully your listeners will, you know,
exactly
really know that there's hope. At 28, my mum was suffering again with depression. She'd hit menopause and it had kind of tipped her over the edge. And I got a phone call at work one day from my father to say she'd gone missing. Could I come home? And she'd gone to a friend's house, but she'd never arrived. Now, my boyfriend at the time, Geeta, was a paramedic and he was on his day off. I know, quite handy. And got home, I remember saying to Dan, we've got to go, Mum's not well. And I could just see the look in his face. You know, the poor guy was on his day off, but he was like, okay, let's go. We picked up my younger sister on the way. Was working in London and my parents live in Kingston. And got home. In my living room was a policeman, and the policeman said to me, he was clutching a suicide note, and he said, "Has your mum ever tried to do something like this before?"
Oh,
And
no.
at first I didn't, my dad didn't tell me there was a note. You know, I'd walked into this situation not even knowing this.
Oh, you just thought she was missing.
Yeah, we just thought she was missing. So we got there, there's a policeman in the living room clutching this suicide note. Then my dad, so the policeman says, "Has she done anything like this before?" I say no, and my dad says yes.
Oh my God.
My whole world collapsed, because at that point I found out that my mother had tried to commit suicide when I was a baby. And actually when my sister was born, she had very bad postnatal depression. And only at that point, Geeta, did I really understand my family history. No one had spoken to me about it.
Well, because there's just this myth of silence around it, isn't there?
Especially mental health. And, you know, I'd been suffering with depression by that point for 8 years.
Somebody could have said, by the way,
yeah.
Oh, how irritating is that?
I know. So, you know, I literally, my world collapsed in that moment, because I thought everything that I thought was my childhood, this happy 2.4, you know, suburban family that went on holiday once a year, and, you know, I've considered ourselves very lucky. It collapsed because we had this, almost like this skeleton in the cupboard that no one had talked about.
So what happened with your mother then?
Well, of course, I couldn't exactly worry about it, because, you know, all of this was like in a flash. So we went to look for her, and at the back of my house is an expanse of woods. And you can turn left, you can turn right. It's, you know, got acres and acres of land each way. And we knew my mum hadn't gone straight on, because that's where her friend lived. So we knew she had to be somewhere.
Left or right?
Absolutely. And my sister said, "Well, where do we go? Which way should we go?" And at that point, when she was sort of screaming at me, "Where do we go?" You know, I remember a voice coming into my head and saying, "Turn right."
Wow.
And I said, "We need to turn right." And she said, "How do you know we need to turn right?" I said, "I don't know. I'm just being told to turn right." And I've got goosebumps just even saying that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I still believe it was my grandmother to this day. Like, she was very close to I never met her, but I have this some kind of connection with her. Yeah. But she, you know, off we went, and we followed the directions that we were given. And my mum had overdosed, and she was by a river, and she'd, luckily for herself, she'd slumped almost on top of herself. And she hadn't obviously fallen into the river, where she would have.
Oh my God.
Died. But, you know, my boyfriend then sternum rub, and I remember calling an ambulance and then proceeding to run for the ambulance. And I just remember, Geeta, that I was, you know, I was overweight, I was smoked, I drank, you know, I just knew I wasn't living how I was supposed to be living. And I just remember running for this ambulance and just saying to whoever that was that just spoke to me, you know, "I will sort myself out, just please do anything and just help my mum. You know, whoever you are, who suddenly has just appeared in my life, you know, I will completely listen." And that was a catalyst. It was a very big spiritual awakening for me. And I'm pleased to say that my mum was okay.
Hooray.
Yeah, she got some counselling and some coaches. Unfortunately for my mum, she's relapsed since. But I think that's, you know, another story in itself. But the situation was a real catalyst for me. Like, how did I have a voice in my head? What was that person? What was that thing? And it sent me on a very big personal development rampage, would be the expression that I would use. I spent the next, I think I was 28. And I think since that point, I've really dived into personal development, spirituality, anything and everything I can train in and get my hands on.
Yeah, completely.
And I think for me, I suppose the key thing for people listening is I now know and understand that my depression was a signpost. Illness is a signpost. Yeah. It's that higher part of us that we're not connected to, trying to wake us up and say, actually, you're not on the right path, or you're not listening. And
well, tragedy. I would go, illness is one of them, but I think tragedy is a sign that you're not listening, whatever that shows up as.
I think there's quite a few different signs that we're not on purpose. You know, it tends to show up in different ways, like exactly as you said.
We used to call it illness interruptus, actually. Well,
Mm.
we still do in Nosh, because we have people that come in who are sick and their lives are never the same, but it is illness interruptus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can be ill. We can, like you said, things keep going wrong. Things keep trying to wake us up. Depressed, anxious. Life just doesn't look the way we want it to. We feel like something's missing, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
All these are signposts, and I think there's more and more people waking up on the planet, which is obviously a good thing.
Yeah, hooray.
So that's my work now. That my work is through changing how I saw myself, I managed to cure my depression, and then I started to really understand that I was here to make a difference. And I started to go after what I was passionate about, actually. And that in itself was really led me down a completely different path. I climbed Kilimanjaro with the Yes Group, which is a local personal development group. And the reason I did that was, at the time I was still in a very toxic environment. All my friends drank and took drugs.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I climb a mountain, I have to take it seriously. And I can't be going out every weekend and, getting messy, because I'll have to take it seriously. And so when I climbed the mountain, the gentleman who took us up the mountain was a member of an organization in America called the Transformational Leadership Council. And it's a peer group for people doing transformation work. It's got people like John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Jack Canfield founded it. It's got some of the personal development greats, Mind Valley, Vishen Lakari.
I love him. I think he's amazing. Lakiani.
Sonia Choquette. And it was everybody whose books I'd read, who I respected, and it was all my passions in one. Like I was always a community builder in my corporate days. I built big, successful networks. And it was almost like this, what I teach now, your Dharma is your intersection between your passions, your unique gifts and talents, and there is a social need for it. And in my case, my Dharma, which is what I teach about now, was creating what now exists, which is an organization which I set up 7 years ago called The Network. And that is a peer group for people doing transformation work. And it's a safe haven for individuals such as yourself, Geeta, our other friend Harriet, to kind of come, get nurtured and filled back up before they go back out and do their work in the world.
That's wonderful, because it's not always easy. You always pay a price for innovating and for pushing down barriers and for moving forward. So to have a safe space for that is a wonderful, wonderful idea.
Yes, and I could see that it was needed. And just another beautiful story to share with your listeners, because I think it will empower and inspire them, that if they have an idea like this that they feel in their bones, in their soul, that it's something that they want to go after. I'm here to tell you that you need to know what you want and not how it's going to happen.
Yes.
And actually, when we are doing our Dharma, which, as I said, is the intersection between our unique gifts, our passions, and has an element of social need, magic and miracles can totally, totally occur. I first heard about the organization on the mountain, and I came down and I wrote a business plan about the organization. And it was like somebody had put a light bulb on in my soul. I'm sure it's sort of similar. I'd love to hear your story around Nosh, because I'm sure it's similar. You kind of get fixated about something that you want to do.
Yeah.
And consequently, I told everybody. I carried it. I really was verbal about it. I even to the point where I went down to 3 days in my job because I was passionate about having 2 days to work on this, even though I didn't have a clue.
How cool is that?
But I was committed, and I think when we're committed, the universe feels that commitment. And
puts air beneath your wings.
Absolutely, yeah. And the universe looks for openings. It's always looking for openings for people
synchronicity,
who want to do its work. And what transpired is probably about 6 months later, after having these dreams and kind of visualizing it, and at the time didn't realize what I was really the biggest thing I've ever manifested. I did my NLP qualifications, and I think energetically I just let something go, which I was holding on to, because the following day I got an email from my now partner in the organization, who I'd connected with once previously, 9 months before. I'd helped her organize an event in the UK. And she emailed me out of the blue 9 months later to say that another friend of hers was coming over to the UK to set up an organisation, European organisation, version of this organisation, and did I want to get involved? And it was like, you know, how, what? And of course, like, the answer was yes, you know.
And hooray.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, in the sense that the lady that I connected with kind of cancelled meetings and, you know, but I'm persistent, and I think we have to be when we're going after what it is we want in life. You know, it was almost like the universe tested me, but I knew it was what I wanted. And, you know, 7 years on, we have a global organisation, members in about 60 members in 15 countries. And we
Amazing.
meet all
And what's the
different places.
purpose of the network, which I would totally love to hear more about, please, anyway?
Yeah, I think it'd be right up your street. It's a peer group for people doing transformation work. So it's not about the connections you get, it's about the support, yeah. But in a kind of, this is a place for us as teachers, authors, mentors, people out in humanity making a difference, for us to come and get filled up. So the weekends themselves are a beautiful mix of networking, connecting, dinners, activities, fun, and then learning and growing, contribution.
And also you were saying that you yourself do teaching separately, is that right? Or is it all through the network?
Separately, I have my own community. So I have the peer group with the network, but I also have a community of individuals who are doing their Dharma. Yeah, so I have a podcast myself. I have a podcast called Kitty Talks, where I interview individuals such as yourself who are doing amazing things in the world to explain the transition, probably quite similar to what we're doing here. And it led me very quickly into the thought that I needed to create a Find and Follow Your Purpose course, because I could see such similarities between the individuals about what they were doing and how they were going about it. And then after studying the concept of Dharma, it was like the final piece of the puzzle for me. I was like, wow, why is this stuff not being taught in schools? You know, we need to have Dharma schools, you know, because the Vedic texts...
Tell me what you, sorry, let me interrupt for 1 second. Tell me what, I'm Indian, so we grew up with Dharma and Karma, but tell me what you understand by Dharma, so I hear what you're saying.
Well, obviously, as you well know, the word Dharma is used in about 18 different Indian languages. And, you know, within Buddhism, it's about the teachings. I actually refer to the Vedic texts, the Vedas. Obviously, the way I describe them for people is this Indian equivalent of the Bible, kind of makes it very simple for people. But they talk about the right path of action. So they say there is a right path of action for the individual and for humanity at the same time. And when we access this right path, then we can live a full and satisfied life and a joyful life, and we're in alignment with our purpose, in our alignment with our makeup. So hence, obviously, those synchronicities that you talked about, that becomes our norm. We're living in alignment with the flow of life. Kriya. So now what I do is I take individuals through a process to understand how to tap into and unveil their Dharma, because I do believe that your purpose is not a flash of insight, it's a path, and it's unveiled to you when you have the courage to take the action.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I used to always wonder about that, because when we came out here, I moved when I first moved here as a child, and you would always hear about karma. And we always grew up with Dharma and Karma, because they were the full idea. And Dharma was what you were born with, and karma was what you did with it. You know, and so you chose your Dharma was not a choice-based thing, because Dharma were your keys. They were your cellular inherent understanding, knowledge, being. And of course, that is for you and for humanity and for the earth and for the universe. And karma was exactly how you impacted and lived out and moved and changed your Dharma. And that was how we were brought up with it. And I used to always wonder, because I was kind of like, you know, why didn't people kind of get it? Why are you only talking about your karma and you're not talking about your Dharma? And then I kind of gave up after a while, because you're just like, well, okay, we're just going to stick with that half an idea. And
you're so right. Dharma is not a word that is, I think it's becoming better known now. But like you said, everyone knows about karma, but not everybody knows about their Dharma. And in my own experience, like having started to listen to myself and go after what excites me, like I talk about a principle of following your highest excitement. When we follow our highest excitement to the best of our ability with no expectation on the outcome, we're walking that optimal path in life. And the reason for that is I truly believe that our excitement is an internal compass.
Yes.
You know, and it's
about
just
what's going to make you happy, make you fulfilled. But it's also, I think, really interesting that so many people, and there are so many ways to stop yourself stepping into the right path. And you seem to have embodied so many of them, because it's eating badly, it's drinking badly, it's being aware of stuff, just the whole way. And that stops you shifting. And the minute you get that all shifted, and so with us, with Nosh, we deliver the right food and we do all of that. And you can see the transition in people who are really, really angry when they walk in the door. And when you've put them and alkalized them, you then get them to a place where they're kind of going, oh, actually, I feel this. Or they are just calmer human beings. And when you're calm, you can hear more, can't you? Because your brain and your heart and your soul opens and connect.
Yeah, we call it a process of waking up, growing up, and then showing up. So in our Dharma community, we take them through this process, effectively exactly what you were talking about there. We clean them up on lots of different levels. Yeah. So, you know, from a health perspective, from a mental perspective, from a trauma perspective, and then at that point you are becoming conscious. You're starting to understand that you create your own reality, and actually you can manifest and create what you want in your life, but you need to be in alignment with who you are and being authentic to who you are. So it's a beautiful journey, I think, for people.
I do think that, and I think that you get to the place with this where after a while you are the journey, and that you are carried along, because the joy I find about living this way and living in alignment, that compared to how I used to live, is it's just weird how much easier life is. And when people come in and you're looking for success outside yourself, and you're like, let's look inside, because all of it comes from inside. And the more you wake up one day and you say the weirdest crap about what you're going to do and who you're going to be, and you're just like, why am I okay? I don't know, but this is what I'm doing. And then you get there, and to not be afraid to have that, not have that. It's like you said at the beginning of this conversation, you said that it was the attachment that was the problem. And when you think life has to look in a particular way, you don't open the door for life to be what it's meant to be, because you were born to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, living in alignment with who you are, there's a sense of trust that you're being taken care of, which is just so beautiful. And like, you know, this is a great example of how you and I got connected. You know, the people, you're living in this flow, the right people turn up at the right time. It's just beautiful. And then you never know where that's going to lead you, but you just trust that actually, you know, everything's happening for your highest
good. There's a reason. And I remember a long time ago being somewhere, I can't remember when, this is when I first sort of started down this path. It must have been 2013 or 14. And I remember reading a book, and I've always meditated and written, I mean, like pretty much my entire adult life. And I remember writing, "Thy will be done." And I had this push to say, thy will be done. And I was like, I'm not saying that. I don't want your will to be done. I want my will to be done. Sod off. I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And I remember just being so resistant to giving it up and going with the flow. And you're like, don't talk crap about flow. If I don't control all of this, you know, and I was a single parent to 3 kids going through a vicious divorce. And I remember thinking, if I don't control all this, my life will fall apart. And actually having to slowly open one finger at a time, and then learning to hold life with an open hand, which is a completely different place to holding it with a closed hand. And just now thinking, yes, thy will be done, and really buying into that concept, because you trust that that's what's supposed to happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the things we talk about in Dharma, because it's quite a difficult concept for people to get their heads around. Like, you know, what I talk to people about is actually you do need a vision for your life, because you wouldn't get in a car without knowing where you're going, right? Most people are living into their default futures. They're not creating what they want to happen. We are powerful.
Consciously.
Exactly. We are powerful creators, but at the same time, you need a vision for where you're going, but you have to surrender to the fact that your higher mind, the universe, can bring you something so much better than you can ever imagine.
Oh, so much.
And I just, for people listening, work out what it is that you want and take baby steps towards it. And then surrender, like we said, live in this life of flow. I would never have believed some of the things that have happened to me in my life. I would never have believed it unless they'd happened to me. Like how the network came into fruition and into being, it's magical. I could never have imagined that. But it's testament to actually understanding our own personal sovereignty and really embracing that and doing the work. So this wake up section of our program is all about you healing and actually reclaiming your personal power and then going ahead and creating the future.
I love that. How can people get hold of you?
Well, I am on Instagram, so Kitty_talks. And then if you're interested in the Do Your Dharma program, the website is www.doyourdharma.co.uk. And we also have a free Facebook group. So just type in Kitty Talks into the Facebook and come and join we've got about 1,000 people on Facebook. So yeah, come and join our community.
That is wonderful, Kitty. Thank you so much. That was a really great experience. And it's so funny because I feel like the conversation happens so much on the surface, but actually there's so much connection underneath it that it doesn't matter that it just happened on the surface, if that makes sense. So it was such a pleasure to meet you. And this is my wonderful guest, Kitty Waters. Please have a look at Kitty Talks on Facebook, Kitty_Talks on Instagram. Have a look at what the work on Dharma that you do, because that must be utterly fascinating. And again, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we have found an ordinary person who has transformed into doing extraordinary things. And I love that concept where you turn around in life and suddenly something happens and you turn left or right, as it was in your case. And it makes another life, because I think that one of the most interesting things is we think we're only ever going to live, as it were, one life, but within one life, although I'm Indian and I really believe in reincarnation, within our one life, we have so many versions of ourselves that can show up. And if you don't like the version that you have now, you can have any other version. And I think that that's important to remember. So thank you for the time, Kitty.
My pleasure, and lovely to get connected to your wonderful audience.
Yes, and this is Living Raw Radio, and my name is Geeta Sidhu-Robb, and we will be together again shortly.